Hello, and welcome to A Sound Constitution here on CHLY 101.7 FM, a show where we focus on health topics important to our community. This year's team is made up of 4 third-year BIU nursing students. Our goal is to demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable sources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes on Facebook and Instagram pages. We would like to remind our listeners that the information presented in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook at A Sound Constitution, Instagram at CHLY A Sound Constitution, Twitter at ASC_BIU, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. We would like to start our show by acknowledging that we are on the unceded territory of the Snamo people, with a broadcasting range that overlaps the Quatsin and Sliaman territories. This acknowledgement is done with gratitude to the Snamo people and with the intention to increase awareness about the truth and reconciliation processes and efforts on Vancouver Island. Additional information and resources surrounding the Snamo history, reconciliation, protocol, and land acknowledgement can be found on our Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube pages. Hi, my name's Ashley, a third-year BSN student, and today throughout the episode, we will be interviewing each student in our group that is a part of A Sound Constitution. Halfway through, we will incorporate a TED Talk called A Tribute to Nurses by Carolyn Jones, who emphasizes relational practice in nursing. Lastly, we are lucky to have the opportunity to interview Dr. Wendy Neander, our skillful instructor. We will be asking her questions on her personal experiences, her perspective on nursing, and career opportunities in Indigenous communities. Your co-hosts today are myself, Ashley, Cassidy, Tyler, and Ashley. Thank you for listening. Now we'll begin our interviews.
My name's Tyler. I'm interviewing Ashley. Ashley, what made you want to go into nursing?
So I always liked to take care and help others kind of my whole life. And I grew up both my parents work in healthcare as pharmacists. It was kind of something I was intrigued by, but I wanted something a bit more patient-centered and hands-on. So I went with nursing, and I've been working as a care aide for about 1.5 years now, and I really, really enjoyed that. So it kind of helps me make sure that I know I'm going the right direction.
Oh, excellent. Bet they help lots with the homework.
Yes, it's very helpful for my pharmacology class.
Very nice. What area of nursing do you want to get into?
I'm kind of all over the place with this one. Eventually, I think I've decided I want to go in the ICU, but I got to take a bunch of extra courses, so probably starting in med-surg to kind of finalize my skills and get comfortable in that before I go ahead with the ICU, because that's a bit more hardcore.
Mm-hmm. What makes you want to go into the ICU?
I like how a lot of the time you have kind of the same patient for quite a while and you're really helping through their process, so I kind of like that. You really get to build relationships with them somewhat. I mean, some of them are too sick at the time for that to happen, but eventually, and I think the families really appreciate you in that aspect, and you get to build a good relationship with them. And I also like kind of the challenge of it. It's like the intensive care unit, so there's a lot of things happening there, and I like that.
Nice. What's your favorite thing about nursing?
I think the main thing I like is the diversity of, there's so many options. If you get bored of one thing, there's so many other places you can go. Another thing I really enjoyed about it is the people, everyone in our classes and stuff, we're all kind of in it for the same reason, so everyone's really compassionate and kind, and you're able to make friends with kind of the same interests as you.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. What changes would you make to the program to better improve the education?
The biggest thing I would say is probably having a bit more hands-on experience and laying it out a bit better so that we get to really consolidate those skills as opposed to having it so spaced out and we feel like we've lost our skills and then you're kind of starting from the beginning when you go back in. So I think that's kind of a big thing. As well, a lot of the classes I feel it's kind of a mix of a bunch of different topics. So maybe kind of having more specific classes would kind of help with things.
Mm-hmm. What has been your best experience in nursing so far?
I think my best experience so far is in my surgical rotation. We got to have a OR observation day. So I got to go into the operating room and watch a patient's surgery. And what I got to watch was an ostomy reversal. So they were putting everything back into him, which is an interesting thing to watch. And just in that whole experience, you got to meet your patient in the morning, hang out with them before the surgery, then watch the surgery, and then I got to have him as a patient back up on the floor. So it was really cool to be able to build that relationship with him throughout the day and then take care of him after.
Yeah, definitely seeing the whole process being and following it through. Very cool. What has been the most influential experience that you've had?
I think for me, the most influential was just my first practicum in general. I feel like sometimes we're unsure about what we're doing. And when I did my first practicum, I loved it so much, and I finally kind of knew that I was making the right decision.
What would your backup be if you weren't in nursing?
At the moment, my backup would be I work as a healthcare aide, so staying as a care aide, because I love doing that. So I think I'd be happy either way. But when I was little, I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I don't think I could see myself doing that at all anymore. I was also interested in pathology for a while, kind of doing autopsies and biopsies. I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be super cool. And give us a fun fact about yourself.
A fun fact about myself, I guess, is I was a dancer. I did mostly ballet for my entire life, and I moved to Victoria for a little while to train there. So that's something cool about me, I guess.
And do you have any hobbies outside of school at the moment?
I do still take a ballet class once a week, which I love, and then we live on the island, so anything outdoors is awesome. I like to go snowboarding in the winter and hiking in the summer and all those nice things outside.
Awesome. And what's your favorite hiking spot?
Ooh, I like the Lanceville, and the foothills are always nice. It's just kind of a shorter hike up to, and there's always a nice view.
Yeah, the view up there is amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I will be interviewing Cassidy today. So, Cassidy, what made you want to go into nursing?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in going into something in healthcare, but my mom, when I was growing up, had kidney disease, so we were in and out of the hospital just for appointments and treatment and that a lot growing up, so got to kind of see that side of it, and the nurses were always so amazing. And we got to work with a lot of doctors too, but I was kind of intrigued by, the fact that you really get to know the nurses and they get to know their patients and build those relationships. So that was kind of my initial motivation for wanting to go into that. But yeah, I'm glad I did. So
That must have been really hard, so I'm glad you had a positive experience with the nurses.
It's really, that's something special about nursing. You just kind of get to build those patient relationships, and that's so important. So.
Totally, yeah. What area of nursing do you want to go into?
Personally, I've always been interested in going into emergency nursing, so working in the emergency room. I don't know, I think I'd like the fast-paced environment and just the fact that you go in and it sounds like it's different every day. So, I don't know, I'm someone that I worry I might get bored, so I don't think I would get bored in that, just because it's always changing and you're working with so many different people and you're not just working with one set patient population, you're kind of working with whoever comes in, and you're that first interaction a lot of people have when they come into the hospital, and I just think that's a kind of cool opportunity
totally.
to work with.
Yeah, that's not for everybody, so that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about nursing?
I think, like I said, I guess the versatility. I think, you get a nursing degree and there's so many different areas you can go into, so you don't necessarily even have to work in the hospital. You can work in the community, like Ashley said, I guess. Just there's so many areas that you can go into and you can work anywhere. Yeah, it's very versatile, which I think is something that'll be good for me, so.
Awesome. What changes would you make to the program to better improve the education?
I think, like my peers said, just making it more, I don't know, I'm a hands-on learner, so making it, I appreciate the hands-on part just to tie in the theory. And also just, I don't know, making it more accessible to different types of learners. I think it's very set to, if you are a certain type of learner, it works for you, but otherwise it's not the most flexible program in that sense. So it is it's very rigid as to like what courses you take and like their delivery and when you take them, all of that. But I think it's a overall good program. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that. Okay. What has been your best experience in nursing?
Oh, I feel like I'm sure I'll have lots more, but personally, I think I saw a C-section on my perinatal rotation, and that was pretty cool. That's just it's I don't know, it's kind of neat just seeing like the family and just I don't know, going into the operation room and just I don't know, seeing the whole process. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
but
it is amazing.
Yeah.
I wish I got to see a C-section.
Yeah, you saw the birth, and I
Mhm.
haven't seen a birth, but that also sounds pretty cool. So
Yeah. Okay, so what would be your backup plan if you didn't go into nursing?
So I originally, out of high school, I had a bit of a crisis about what I wanted to do, and I went into kinesiology. I wanted to be an occupational therapist. So that would probably be what I would be doing if I wasn't in nursing, but I'm really glad I transferred. I like nurses get to work with kind of a bigger variety of patients and a bigger patient population. It's more, it's the versatility, basically.
Yeah,
so.
there's a lot more opportunity for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What's something about you that most people don't know?
Oh, man. I don't know. That's a hard one. I guess most of my family lives in New Zealand, and I have my New Zealand passport. That has nothing to do with nursing, but...
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I
just a
heard it's
random
beautiful
fact.
there.
Yeah, it's very nice. I miss it.
And tell me about yourself. Like, do you have any hobbies outside of school?
Yeah, I like... pretty much anything outside, honestly. In the summer, hiking and camping. Rock climbing. I've not recently. I guess nursing school is kind of busy.
Yeah.
But and skiing in the winter, it's pretty good. I don't know, I'm from Calgary, so there's a lot more skiing out in Banff and that. But yeah, that's pretty
Awesome.
much it.
Well, thank you so much, Cassidy. It was great learning about you.
Thanks, it's great chatting.
And if you're just tuning in, this is Nursing Group B on CHLY 101.7 FM. We are third-year nursing students at VIU. Stay tuned and get to know the group.
Thank you, Tyler. Now back to our last two student interviews.
I'm Ashley, and I'm going to be interviewing Tyler. So, Tyler, what made you want to go into nursing?
Well, growing up, my mom worked at a medical office, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid. And growing up around healthcare and being in the healthcare setting was really familiar for me, and so nursing seemed like a no-brainer. I really thought about being a physician, though, but the hands-on work of nursing is very, very appealing for me. And the intimate interactions that you have with patients and the work there is just so rewarding.
Yeah, sounds like you made the right decision. So what area of nursing do you want to go into?
I'm definitely considering travel nursing as an option, just being able to travel to a new location whenever, and unless you're under a contract. But having those new experiences, being in a different place, city, different hospitals, learning how other places may operate, and just what works best, what doesn't work best, and really take that forward into my nursing career.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a bit more on what travel nursing is for our audience?
Travel nursing is, say they're short-staffed in a hospital in Comox. So they would have a database of travel nurses that they can access and pick from, and get in contact with those travel nurses and ask them to fill in spots that are needed. And so the nurse would travel over to the hospital, and work there as a travel nurse on the given unit.
Okay, that'd be super cool. Sounds like you get a lot of really cool experiences out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your favorite thing about nursing so far?
My favorite thing so far has been the diversity of the profession, there's just so many different avenues to explore with nursing. And we had a speaker a few years ago come in, and she was a lawyer nurse, and the way she talked about what she did and how she got there was super cool. She started out just where we were, like nursing school, working on the units, and then finally there was a case that came up and she volunteered for the case, and now she's working in the court system as a nurse, and that's just incredible, just how diverse the profession really is.
Wow, yeah, that's really cool. Is there any changes that you would make to the program to better improve the education?
Yeah, we have a self-assessment form called a PAF, and we have meetings with the profs every midterm and final time and discuss our self-assessment forms with them, and they basically gauge us where we're at within the course. So for excelling in decision-making skills, professional responsibility, health and healing, teaching and learning, and leadership roles. And that's basically how we're graded in the practicum. So it would be interesting to see the PAFs be more of a guiding tool for what courses we need to take in the next semester to help improve those areas in our practicums. So say you're doing really good in your health and healing, you're excelling in it even. Let's make it so you don't have to take that course next semester and maybe work on your decision-making skills. There's this course for that will help better your critical thinking skills and for practicum. And I think that would be a better way of getting through the education and getting through the program, as it would take what we're struggling with and help improve that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Make it a bit more personalized.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say was the most influential experience that you've had in your nursing profession so far?
Definitely when I failed for the second time. I was diagnosed with ADHD right before the end of the course, and that really put a lot of things into perspective for me. But by that point, though, it was already too late for me in the course to save my grade. So I took the semester off and really focused on myself and better understand what works for me, what doesn't work for me, how to manage, and did a lot of research on ADHD itself and figured out the best ways to support myself, essentially.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you for getting through all that.
Thank you.
What has been your best experience in nursing?
Definitely watching or observing a C-section be performed. Just watching the surgeon cut through all the different layers of tissue that were there and get to the uterus to extract the baby. It was super, super interesting seeing the different layers of tissues that were there, because we see them all the time in our textbooks. And so to see them in person was just mind-blowing. It was so cool.
Yeah, that's such a cool experience. What would be your backup plan if you didn't go into nursing?
Backup plan would probably be working with my dad. He's a driller blaster, and he's working on a pipeline up north right now. And so I would be working with him and my other friends up there. And another backup plan would probably be kinesiology or even getting some sort of degree. I really like learning, so probably more education-based.
Awesome. Yeah, pipeline would be very different than nursing.
Very different.
Something about you that most people don't know.
I really if I'm having a hard time with something, I'll go and reward myself with a Lego set. Just something small, something fun, because I used to build them all the time as a kid. So to kind of have that nostalgic trip for an hour and a half just helps bring me down.
Yeah, sounds like a good reward.
Yeah, it's expensive though.
Do you have any hobbies outside of school?
I weightlift on the side, and I've really found myself getting involved with a bit of a community in town here, and made so many connections, so many friends, and we're always supporting each other always encouraging each other to lift more, lift heavy, work on form, eat better, get your protein in. It's a really good support system.
That's awesome. It's good to have a good support system, especially through nursing school.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's all the questions I have, so thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Ashley.
So my name's Cassidy. I'm just going to be asking a couple questions to Ashley. So, Ashley, what made you want to go into nursing?
Yeah, so I come from a family of nurses who inspired me to go into healthcare. I've always been drawn to help others from a young age and provide compassionate and holistic care. Really calls to me. I've also worked as an HCA since 2016, providing care for dementia clients. So I really wanted to kind of move up and have a bigger scope of practice in this profession.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of have different experiences there. So
Yeah.
So what kind of nursing do you want to go into? Do you know?
I really like public health nursing. I like working in the community. I actually had a practice placement at the public health unit just behind the hospital there, NRGH. And I really enjoyed that community setting and working with mothers and their children and giving vaccines and just like teaching them about the health of their child.
Yeah, it's a really cool area. It's a little different than just hospital nursing.
Yeah.
And what's your favorite thing about nursing?
I really like to be able to establish trusting relationships with patients. In my experience in the hospital, many nurses were working under staff shortages. And myself as a student, I was able to provide and establish like positive relationships with the patients. And they even expressed to me that they were grateful for my care. So that felt really nice, and I like to be able to make that difference.
Yeah, you're in kind of a special situation.
Yeah.
Kind of nice. And what changes would you make to the nursing program to better your education, if you could?
Definitely, I'd probably put the community placement closer to the end of first year.
Oh, yeah.
Just so like our hospital placements are consecutive. So I get to maintain more information that way and like keep up with my skills.
So what was the most influential experience you've had in your nursing profession so far?
I'm not really sure about influential, but the most inspirational experience I had was probably on the perinatal unit. I was able to witness a birth, and the mother there was kind of like, I don't really want your help, but like you can watch. So I was like, okay, I'll just be a fly on the wall. And as her contractions grew shorter, she was like, can you come over here? Like, I need someone to hold my leg up. So, of course, I like ran in. And I was like, yeah. And I helped her birth her child. And just watching like the baby being born is just such a beautiful and inspirational moment to nursing.
Yeah, that's really special.
Yeah, that I've never really thought of. So, yeah, it was a very beautiful experience.
Yeah, I bet. And what would be your backup plan if you didn't go into nursing?
Well, when I was a child, I really wanted to be a marine biologist. I really enjoyed the sciences, so maybe that. I also wanted to be a veterinarian, but I really struggle with euthanization of animals. Yeah. I don't know if I can handle that. Yeah. It's heartbreaking, so.
That's fair. So, tell me about yourself outside of school. What kind of things are you into?
I really enjoy the outdoors, so I have a Toyota 4x4 that I like to take out and go wheeling with. Dirt biking was my favorite thing to do. But I go out, I go hiking. We have a husky dog at home there, so I take him out to the beach, up the mountain.
You live in a good place for it.
I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, well, thank you, Ashley. That was great. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you everyone for listening to our interviews, and now we're going to provide a fun fact for a little break.
Did you know the earliest history of nursing dates back more than 5,000 years ago? Early nursing was mostly carried out by nuns who would care for sick and impoverished people in the streets. Florence Nightingale was a nurse that advocated for nursing care to be controlled by nurses, as it used to be very much controlled by the doctors or hospital administrators. She had a major influence on what the nursing profession is today.
Thank you, Ashley, for the fun fact. So we thought it was important to incorporate a TED Talk that emphasizes relational practice provided by nurses in our episode. Stay tuned to hear the TED Talk, A Tribute to Nurses by Carolyn Jones. She spent 5 years interviewing, photographing, and filming nurses and traveling places where she dealt with nation's largest public health issues.
This TED Talk features photographic ethnographer Carolyn Jones, recorded live at TEDMed 2016.
As patients, we usually remember the names of our doctors, but often we forget the names of our nurses. I remember one. I had breast cancer a few years ago, and somehow I managed to get through the surgeries and the beginning of the treatment just fine. I could hide what was going on. Everybody didn't really have to know. I could walk my daughter to school. I could go out to dinner with my husband. I could fool people. But then my chemo was scheduled to begin, and that terrified me because I knew that I was going to lose every single hair on my body because of the kind of chemo that I was going to have. I wasn't going to be able to pretend anymore as though everything was normal. I was scared. I knew what it felt like to have everybody treating me with kid gloves, and I just wanted to feel normal. I had a port installed in my chest. I went to my first day of chemotherapy, and I was an emotional wreck. My nurse, Joanne, walked in the door, and every bone in my body was telling me to get up out of that chair and take for the hills. But Joanne looked at me and talked to me like we were old friends. And then she asked me, "Where'd you get your highlights done?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? You're going to talk to me about my hair when I'm on the verge of losing it?" I was kind of angry. And I said, "Really, hair?" And with a shrug of her shoulders, she said, "It's going to grow back." And in that moment, she said the one thing I had overlooked, and that was that at some point, my life would get back to normal. She really believed that. And so I believed it too. Now, worrying about losing your hair when you're fighting cancer may seem silly at first, but it's not just that you're worried about how you're going to look. It's that you're worried that everybody's going to treat you so carefully. Joanne made me feel normal for the first time in 6 months. We talked about her boyfriends, we talked about looking for apartments in New York City, and we talked about my reaction to the chemotherapy, all kind of mixed in together. And I always wondered, how did she so instinctively know just how to talk to me? Joanne Staha and my admiration for her marked the beginning of my journey into the world of nurses. A few years later, I was asked to do a project that would celebrate the work that nurses do. I started with Joanne, and I met over 100 nurses across the country. I spent 5 years interviewing, photographing, and filming nurses for a book and a documentary film. With my team, we mapped a trip across America that would take us to places dealing with some of the biggest public health issues facing our nation: aging, war, poverty, prisons. And then we went places where we would find the largest concentration of patients dealing with those issues. Then we asked hospitals and facilities to nominate nurses who would best represent them. One of the first nurses I met was Bridget Kumbella. Bridget was born in Cameroon, the oldest of 4 children. Her father was at work when he had fallen from the 4th floor and really hurt his back. And he talked a lot about what it was like to be flat on your back and not get the kind of care that you need. And that propelled Bridget to go into the profession of nursing. Now, as a nurse in the Bronx, she has a really diverse group of patients that she cares for, from all walks of life and from all different religions. And she's devoted her career to understanding the impact of our cultural differences when it comes to our health. She spoke of a patient, a Native American patient that she had, that wanted to bring a bunch of feathers into the ICU. That's how he found spiritual comfort. And she spoke of advocating for him and said that patients come from all different religions and use all different kinds of objects for comfort. Whether it's a holy rosary or a symbolic feather, it all needs to be supported. This is Jason Short. Jason is a home health nurse in the Appalachian Mountains, and his dad had a gas station and a repair shop when he was growing up. So he worked on cars in the community that he now serves as a nurse. When he was in college, it was just not macho at all to become a nurse, so he avoided it for years. He drove trucks for a little while, but his life path was always pulling him back to nursing. As a nurse in the Appalachian Mountains, Jason goes places that an ambulance can't even get to. In this photograph, he's standing in what used to be a road. Top of the mountain mining flooded that road. And now the only way for Jason to get to the patient living in that house with black lung disease is to drive his SUV against the current up that creek. The day I was with him, we ripped the front fender off the car. The next morning, he got up, put the car on the lift, fixed the fender, and then headed out to meet his next patient. I witnessed Jason caring for this gentleman with such enormous compassion, and I was struck again by how intimate the work of nursing really is. When I met Brian McMillian, he was raw. He had just come back from a deployment, and he hadn't really settled back into life in San Diego yet. And he talked about his experience of being a nurse in Germany and taking care of the soldiers coming right off the battlefield. Very often, he would be the first person they would see when they opened their eyes in the hospital. And they would look at him as they were lying there, missing limbs. And the first thing they would say is, "When can I go back? I left my brothers out there." And Brian would have to say, "You're not going anywhere. You've already given enough, brother." Brian is both a nurse and a soldier who's seen combat. So that puts him in a unique position to be able to relate to and help heal the veterans in his care. This is Sister Stephen, and she runs a nursing home in Wisconsin called Villa Loretto, and the entire circle of life can be found under her roof. She grew up wishing they lived on a farm, so given the opportunity to adopt local farm animals, she enthusiastically brings them in. And in the springtime, those animals have babies. And Sister Stephen uses those baby ducks, goats, and lambs as animal therapy for the residents at Villa Loretto, who sometimes can't remember their own name, but they do rejoice in the holding of a baby lamb. The day I was with Sister Stephen, I needed to take her away from Villa Loretto to film part of her story. And before we left, she went into the room of a dying patient. And she leaned over and she said, "I have to go away for the day. But if Jesus calls you, you go. You go straight home to Jesus." Well, I was standing there and thinking, it was the first time in my life I witnessed that you could show someone you love them completely.
Hi everyone, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to CHLY 101.7 FM, A Sound Constitution. Next, we will be interviewing our instructor, Dr. Wendy Neander. Stay tuned to hear about Wendy's knowledgeable experiences and perspectives in nursing.
Please welcome our prof, Wendy Neander. So Wendy, tell us, how long have you been a nurse for?
Well, that I always have to remind myself or pinch myself because I did go in after high school, and so I've been a nurse for about 40 years.
Wow.
So you can imagine the changes I've seen in my career, especially now with our electronic health records and all of our technology. When I first started, we did not have IV pumps. We used gravity. So now we've got these fancy pumps, which I know how to use, but I also encourage students to use their brain because you do have good brains and you can figure out what you should do and whether or not that pump is going to cooperate with the best care that your client needs.
Totally. And would you say the technology that has been implemented has improved the care?
I would say in some ways, yes. However, in other ways, it's a challenge. Like the electronic health records don't often leave you a spot to write in what you would in a narrative record. There's a little bit too much of the what I call tick box charting. So what does it mean if you write someone ate, 50% of their meal on a tick box? what was their meal? Did they eat all of their ice cream and drink all of their hot chocolate and didn't eat any of their vegetables? I mean, that's a bit of a different assessment than just a 50%. So although it's very handy in certain types of charting, because I do use electronic charting right now, it's handy in being able to flip back relatively quickly in some cases to figure out what happened prior.
Right. Awesome. So Wendy, what made you want to go into nursing?
Well, that's an excellent question, Tyler. It's a long time ago. It was when I was in high school when I first thought about what I wanted to do. I think probably one of the motivating factors was I enjoyed engaging with people, and I felt it was important to have a career that would allow me to do that. Sort of a funny thing from my childhood was that my mother had gotten me a nursing uniform costume as a child. Never really thinking much about it. I'm not really sure why, but when I did make the decision to go into nursing, she was very pleased with that.
Oh, that's funny. And what has been your favorite thing about nursing so far?
I think the favorite thing is probably the learning. I have had a continual process of being able to use my curiosity, and I've learned probably a lot more from any individuals, families, and communities that I've had the privilege to engage with around health and healing than I feel I've probably given to them. I've been very blessed in that nursing has allowed me to travel and work in various different capacities, both in Canada and a number of other countries. So from that, if I were to reflect back on when I first went into nursing, I've changed considerably, and I've learned a great deal, so that the way I perceive nursing now is very different from when I originally started.
Wow, that's a great story. How many countries have you been to?
I gotta count for a second here, but including Canada, I've been in 7 different countries.
Wow. And out of your experience in nursing, what has been your most influential?
I think what has made me, or what I'd like to believe the nurse I am today, is I have had the privilege of living and engaging with Indigenous populations in various different settings, both in Canada and in other countries, and then also as a child growing up.
Wow, it's incredible. Have you traveled? Of course, you traveled for work. What types of skills were you practicing when you traveled?
Well, I think one of the things that we always get confused about nursing is a focus on skill versus actually the knowledge or the education. So I certainly had to use many skills, which included being in isolated areas and dealing with emergencies with very limited kinds of supplies. But I think what's much more important, which I think is hard, and especially nowadays with the way nursing sometimes is portrayed on television, is there's actually really quite a bit of thinking behind the skills. So what nursing in different settings with different contexts has allowed me is the ability to really use my brain and really stretch out and think. The skills come afterwards. But certainly you do think and you learn some pointers on how you might use a particular skill in a different setting.
Mm-hmm. Comparing and contrasting your experiences with like the rural areas compared to being more in like a city situation, what were the biggest differences there?
One of the big differences is in a rural area, you do everything. And you are using your full ability based on your education, and so initially it would have been as a BSN graduate. So you're pulling everything together, whereas urban, you are a little bit more contained, and sometimes you are in an area that has many resources, many other professionals, and you're not the only one, so you have a team that you can consult with and work with. When you're in a rural area, sometimes your team member might be an RCMP officer. And an interesting historical piece of it to know is that many years ago, when nurses were working in the more remote, isolated communities, their controlled substance counts, the narcotics, were done with the RCMP officer in the community because there wasn't a second nurse.
Oh, man. Wow. And kind of going off that, what career opportunities are available for nurses in Indigenous communities?
There are many, and I think obviously one of my goals and one of the things that I have encouraged over the years, because I have lived and worked in many Indigenous communities, is to encourage Indigenous peoples to go on to nursing. I think that one of the really important benefits of going to work in an Indigenous community, especially if you're not Indigenous or you don't identify as Indigenous, is a whole different worldview and a whole different perspective. You need to take into the context the historical and the cultural. And what you will have, if you take, I'm just going to name one particular nursing group, which is the CHLY, which is not far from where we are right now. And they have a beautiful philosophy and vision for nursing. So their vision is the strength of the person. They're the expert. They really work on reflective practice in terms of how they engage with populations, especially CHLY peoples. And I think there isn't the pressure for you have to accomplish something, which unfortunately is often the case in more urban settings, where you've got an institution that has certain guidelines, and they're important guidelines that have to be followed, but the CHLY are able to look beyond that and really focus on the health and healing. And I think that's what opportunities in Indigenous communities can offer new graduates. They're not without their challenges, because you can be very isolated and be on your own. In terms of actual nursing areas, there's home care, there's community, there's a strong focus on maternal and child health. There are outpost stations where nurses provide various different services. Some of them in BC, of course, are overseen by the band or the governing body, and others are overseen by Health Canada. Like Manitoba has many northern nursing stations that fall under Health Canada, and there are nurses that do work still with Health Canada.
Wow, that's a lot of opportunity there.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of opportunities no matter where you want to go in nursing right now.
Yeah.
Thank you both, Tyler and Wendy. We're just going to take a short break, and Tyler's going to provide us with a pop quiz.
Here's the pop quiz of the episode. What is the max dosage of Tylenol or acetaminophen a person may have in a day? Is it A, 3.5 grams, B, 4 grams, C, 2,000 milligrams, or D, 1,500 milligrams? You have 10 seconds to answer the question. And it's B, 4 grams. Exceeding 4 grams of Tylenol or acetaminophen will lead to liver toxicity.
Liver toxicity is classified as inflammation of your liver,
which is a very unpleasant, painful experience. If you've exceeded 4 grams of Tylenol, contact the 811 nurses hotline. They will give you further instructions as what you should do next. That's all for this pop quiz. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyler. Now back to our interview with Dr. Wendy Neander, our instructor from the VIU BSN program.
And do you have any tips for new grads and what kind of route they should take once they are graduated to help build their foundation of their career?
I think when you graduate with a BSN, the understanding is you're graduating with a strong generalist foundation, which is very important. So it allows you to develop a solid foundation and then look at where you might work after that. I would say go where you feel called. I know there's a lot of pressure to consider going directly into med-surg to gain skills and foundations, but that's not for everyone. And certainly as a graduate, as a BSN graduate, you can branch out and look at other possibilities. And the world is pretty much your oyster right now, given the present situation. So follow your calling. Don't feel pressured because someone says if you don't do this, then you won't be a good nurse. Because there's some very wonderful opportunities for nurses. And you can start in one place, and if that is your decision is to start on a medical unit, and then from there branch out.
Totally.
And be good to yourself. Be kind. If you're in a situation now, the healthcare crisis we're in puts a lot of pressure on a graduate, and so that means you have to look after yourself. And if you financially feel you don't need to work full-time, then don't work full-time, so you have a good life balance.
Yeah, that's important. Finding the balance, for sure. And what route did you take when you first started working as a nurse?
Well, I obviously graduated very young because my healthcare nursing career started after high school, and I probably did work on a medical surgical unit. Now that I'm going to think back here, but I also had the opportunity to work in other areas. So I worked quite a bit in pediatrics, and then I worked in perinatal, and then I was able to, when I did my master's education, I was able to go to the UK and not take their full midwifery program, but have part of my practice education in a midwifery unit in the UK. So that further supported my my background and interest in maternal child health. Community is another area that I've worked in. I've done the rural, and the rural you do everything, so that's where your emergency comes in. There's some medical, sometimes some surgical follow-up, or sometimes if you're in a small setting, there will be some surgeries. And then really sort of engaging with the communities. And those communities differ. So,
how was the UK experience with the education comparing to here?
Well, it was very interesting. There were a couple things. One is they had screens in their windows, and the hospital was much more open, and they had much lower resources, but they were very creative. Like their birthing room was sort of all hand put together or designed by a carpenter. And one of the biggest things that I had to learn was some of the language they used, which was, of course, English that I could understand completely. But what they used to ask, and I had no idea what they were asking initially, is they would ask the women in the labor perinatal area if they needed to spend a penny. And I had no idea what spending a penny meant. Spending a penny meant did you need to go to the washroom? Because the public toilets, apparently, you put a penny in to use. So that was one learning. They had a very well coordinated level of care. So midwives oversaw all of the births. Some could be in a birthing center, some could be in the home. And those were considered births that weren't complicated. And they looked at pregnancy and birth as normal. If they were concerned about risks or complications, that's when an obstetrician would be part of the care. Now, that could be in collaboration with the midwife. There were frequent home visits. Following the birth of a child, when the mom and new baby went home, they had a visit every day for 10 days. And some of those were done by public health nurses, and some were midwifery visits. So it was an excellent supportive model of care. And because they had so many opportunities, they had just an incredible natural ability to figure out when someone needed to be moved to a higher level of care.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's wow. And what does an obstetrician do by chance? Can you just elaborate on that role?
Okay, yeah, that's kind of a big word, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So an obstetrician is a medical specialist that focuses on childbearing or the perinatal period, and that even gets broken down further. So they will follow a woman who is considered higher risk or there's concerns about the pregnancy, to make sure that they're well looked after and have any kinds of interventions that are needed to maintain a successful pregnancy, because some women are higher risk and they have more challenges becoming pregnant or remaining pregnant. So that's a specialty area that will know how to handle things that we would not normally see.
Mm-hmm.
And normally in parentheses, just in quotations, because it's not a good thing to say what's normal and not normal.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Do you have any tips for students to help them have success in the nursing program?
I would say have confidence in yourself.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if you're accepted into a nursing program, you've been chosen because you do have the abilities. Now, yes, it is a challenge. At times, there's an incredible amount of knowledge that you have to pick up from various different disciplines, not only nursing, but there's biomedical knowledge that you need to learn. And so I think being able to communicate when you find you're having challenges or you're struggling. So reach out to your teachers if you're not understanding things. And one of the things I think that's a real beauty with nursing is that you will form sort of a small group of peers based on where you are clinically or where you are in your practice settings, and sometimes in your class settings. So use one another, support one another as you're going through the program. I think reaching out to the upper year students can also be helpful, because they're going to give you the hope or say, look, this is where I am. I was there last year and I made it, and you'll make it through. And I think being reflective, that's one of the things that I think is very important, and I've done for years on my practice, is to be that reflective practitioner. And so reflect on, go back to year one, where were you at year one? Or reflect on, you're in year two now, year three. So you can reflect from semester to semester, and I think giving yourself the ability to say, well, okay, I've done this, and maybe this didn't go as the way I thought it was, or I didn't understand it, but now I've learned this, and I can move forward. And self-care, obviously, is really important, because nursing is not without stress.
Totally. And what kind of self-care strategies do you recommend?
I recommend getting out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we are very privileged to live in a beautiful place on the traditional unceded lands of the Snuneymuxw peoples. And I think we have to be grateful and thankful that they kept the land as it was to what we have today. And out in nature. Sometimes it's going out with friends. Some people do well at the gym, trying to eat well, sleep. Music is a wonderful thing. Some people really enjoy music. Some people have other things, like they like to act or watch movies. So I think any of those things, I think everybody has that. Sometimes just having quiet moments somewhere is also self-care.
Mm-hmm. And that's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you would like to share with us?
No, I think it's wonderful that you're doing this as part of your practice education. It's definitely branching out and showing the value that nursing brings to health and healing in general, and this is a good medium in which to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So before we end here, I just want to say a big thank you to our guest, our instructor, Dr. Wendy Neander, for sitting down with A Sound Constitution and sharing your knowledge and opportunity in nursing. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to sit down with us. I would also like to thank my co-hosts for sharing a bit about yourselves. And lastly, thank you to our listeners for taking the time to listen and get to know each of us that are a part of A Sound Constitution. For details and show notes from today's episode, or to follow along on what's coming up this season, check out our Facebook page, A Sound Constitution, our Instagram, CHLY, A Sound Constitution, our Twitter at ASC_BIU. If you've missed parts of this episode or would like to listen to this episode or episodes from our past shows, check out our YouTube at A Sound Constitution. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thank you.